And naturally, even a demon is confused when it wakes up in front of a live studio audience. Like he's saying, like, where am I, Jack? What's going on?
Who are these people? What is this?
There is no need to be alarmed.
Satan's taking over the idiot box, because this week it's Late Night with the Devil from 2023, directed by the brothers Cameron and Colin Carnes.
When a late night talk show host sees his ratings nosedive, he turns to the occult in a desperate bid to turn things around.
Once upon a time, the found footage genre was one of the most interesting and innovative and refreshing things to happen to film in a long time. When you had the Blair Witch Project in 1999, which became a complete phenomenon, genuinely convincing a big part of the public that this was a genuine found footage, archived discovery, and these people had really died and gone missing. In actual fact, they were just struggling actors, so no one really recognized them. The film was quite new, and the marketing strategy naturally lent into the fact that it was this a mystery. Did this really happen? Was this really found footage that someone else made into a documentary? To heighten all these things. Now, it wasn't long before the public was savvy to the fact that these obviously weren't real tapes and it was a film, but it spawned a whole new subgenre. What started off as one of the most interesting and unique and distinct and strange new kind of subgenres quickly became one of the most predictable and boring. You knew what you were going to get. You knew you weren't going to see a lot. You knew there was going to be a lot of poking around the camera in the dark until you suddenly spot something. You knew the characters were probably going to die and the tape would be left on the floor. As it became more predictable and became formulaic and you knew what you were going to get, it became a lot less satisfying. The gimmick had worn thin. It still had success in the early noughties with the likes of Paranormal Activity, which spawned a bunch of sequels. None of them were going to win any Oscars, but obviously the public was resonating with it. But even then, it falls into that category, I feel like, of not films people see resentfully, but it's an event film. Like, it's a film maybe to go with your friends when you're a teenager as a group. It's a film to maybe take your girlfriend to. It wasn't a holy shit moment film. It wasn't like a film people were going to want to watch time and time again. They were never going to be classics. It was nearly like the way 3D came back for a second. They all had to have that moment where someone throws an axe at the screen and it comes at the audience. It was nearly not expected to have any value beyond just showcasing the gimmick. And that's what these films were starting to feel like in the found footage genre. But having said that, it's probably one of the genres that is prevalent in filmmaking in recent years, not so much right now, but has the most untapped potential because there's so many different avenues you can go down to. And I think this film, Late Night with the Devil, is a good example of showcasing the kind of promise that this genre could hold if people get more creative with it. Because firstly, it's not so much a found footage film, it's more like an archived, blacklisted footage film. The majority of the film is taken from a recording of a Tuesday night late night showing of a fictional talk show in America on the night of Halloween in 1977 as Paranormal Activity takes place. But it doesn't just rely on that. In the opening prologue, it essentially refers to a fictional documentary that seems to have been made after the events unfolded, recounting what happened that night.
On Halloween night, 1977. A desperate Jack plans an episode he hopes will turn his fortunes around.
This gives a lot of context that would have taken so long to give to the audience if you didn't have this prologue. Can you imagine just trying to drip feed details to the audience of the context surrounding this film if it just had to come out of bits of conversations you were seeing as the camera's sort of following them around in between takes? It would take forever. But with this documentary, you open it up and it feels like you're watching a crazy Netflix documentary reveal on this event that happened. It's fictional, but it's brilliant because it just bangs through the info that you want to have and gives you this really integral, important background info. His experiences as a late night show host, what his motivations are, but also these little hints of like, he had some weird relationship with the people at Bohemian Grove and he's attended it a few times, and given hints towards the Alex Jones kind of reveal video when he broke into Bohemian Grove. And if you don't know about Bohemian Grove, it's basically a sort of unofficial super elitist club / frat weekend weekend that happens in this part of America with presidents and former presidents and heads of industry and really important people, and then sprinkled in kind of like not so significant people that you'd be like, why are they there? The famous old case was Alex Jones broke in there. Whatever you think of Alex Jones, like this footage was pretty verified, and he was also with a English journalist who's seen as a lot more credible, I guess, than Alex Jones. Got this footage of all these geezers, presidents, heads of industry, dressed in weird cloaks, surrounding this owl statue and doing this bizarre ritual. Now, their version of events was, yeah, we were dressed in that cloaks, but it's just a silly initiation thing for new people. Like, it's just, you know, it's a bit of fun. We do karaoke after. Don't take it so seriously. Like, relax. But when you watch the footage, it's pretty fucking weird. And it's pretty creepy. So it hints at that, and then it doesn't really come back into it much, but you're getting all this great context and build up. And it's one of the things that, rather than just being found footage, maybe if the genre could expand more into just using any footage, you know, it could be video footage at one point that the main character was holding, and then it could suddenly cut to a documentary that was made after the fact that's getting cut into it randomly at points to give more context, and then maybe cut to like someone's phone footage that they recorded of a certain moment. Be more open to different parts of it, because otherwise the limitations of it all has to be filmed through the camera is always there. And the fact that it's not like a handheld camera found footage film in this film alleviates that classic suspension of belief thing that fucks with so many people when watching these kind of films of why would you still be holding the camera?
Yeah. I enjoy found footage films. You're right, the gimmick is wearing thin. It's kind of like spoof films. Like, I loved Scary Movie 1. Scary Movie 2 was okay. Scary Movie 3 was a pile of shit.
But they're making a new one actually, with the Wayans brothers.
Yeah, I saw that. I love Blair Witch Project. One of my favourite found footage films, which I'd actually like to review as an episode, is Wreck. Fantastic film. I don't care what anyone says. That was a really interesting concept just because, yes, it was found footage, but it was set in the apartment complex, which was cool as fuck with zombies, you know.
Television documents the chaos, beams the horror into our living rooms.
I actually watched this first on a flight to Dubai. You know, going on planes. It's weird. They often have a lot of newer films, so it's pretty cool. I was going through the selection and I saw this and it looked interesting, you know. The lead actor is kind of one of those guys. Remember the guy that we talked about that's in Heat and Batman?
The opening of Batman Heist, yeah.
You always see him in stuff and you're like, oh, that guy's a good actor, but who actually is he? Do you know what I mean? So when he popped up, I was like, oh, I like this guy, even though I didn't know who he actually was. And what you said about the opening, yeah, imagine me being on a flight, knackered, babies crying, and, you know, not having the concentration. By the way, I did watch this again before the review, so let me just put that out there. Yeah.
So can I ask, what's your opinion on watching films on planes? Because, you know, Christopher Nolan would cry if he heard you watched Interstellar on a plane. You know, you want it on a giant screen with the best possible sound, surrounded by people that are engaging with the film or, you know, reacting to it, and that's the best sort of energy and atmosphere to watch a film. Obviously a plane, you know, tiny screen, there's loads of background noise, you're uncomfortable, it's the worst, should be the worst. It definitely is probably the worst on paper. But I always find, I don't know, there's something about flying, it like makes me more sensitive to whatever feeling the film's trying to sell me. You know, pretty much never got teary in films, but the one or twice I have as an adult has been while flying. And I've heard a lot of people anecdotally say something similar, where they're more likely to cry or more likely to get freaked out or into a film. And I don't know if it's because you really got nowhere to go, your phone doesn't work, how intense it is, or is it something about flying? People get unwell when they're flying or jet lagged, which isn't just like you're out of whack with the time, it is something more going on in your body. So I wonder, like, is there something about that when you're flying?
The whole process of going on holiday and going through an airport and flying is like sensory overload. You're tired, number one, like half the time you're traveling. You're going through the airport, there's just hundreds and hundreds of people just everywhere. And for me, my journey to get on this plane was shit because for some reason I got searched up. I don't know if it's the way I walk, if they think I've stuck something up my bum. And I'm limping like the penguin, like, do you know what I mean? And I got searched up and I had to take my shoes off and my fucking socks and they were swabbing my feet, and I hate shit like that. And I'd got on the plane, and you get on the plane and I struggle to concentrate because I have dyspraxia, so any noise, like, I get jittery and it takes me out of it. And also with the cabin pressure, it gives you heightened sensation, so I can imagine why you would be emotional. Again, as I said, I had to re-watch this on my big TV, number one. I struggle to concentrate because obviously you're watching it, you've got those shit little headphones that sounds crap, and every second they make an announcement, it's like when you rate Cokes and someone will say, you know what, McDonald's Coke's the worst, or McDonald's Coke's the best. I would put it as one of my worst, you know, like it's better than watching a film on a fucking iPhone, but I don't enjoy it. But I get your point.
Yeah, probably choose it last as a way to watch a film. But whenever I end up watching a film in that way, it's often pretty intense and satisfying. So it's weird, like, conundrum.
But it was the perfect film to watch at that time, and that opening really set it up. He's against the Goliath of late night talk show host Johnny Carson. They're making parodies of him in boxing rings being beaten up, and no matter what this guy tries, he just can't beat this guy in the ratings. And you know what, I thought from the opening sequences where he signs a contract and all that, fair play to him, you know, it talked a bit out of his life, it talked about the unrest in America at the time. He was a radio host, so we get his background, because I was wondering, how did he make it onto here? Was he a personality before, you know? It set up the opening really well, like within 4 minutes we have the rest of the film ready to go. Great job, I thought. What was that? Pigeon?
Imagine this became a found footage thing. We get murdered by an axe-wielding murderer.
Well, we
just jumped on the roof.
We are in a cabin, so yeah. What we're going to see is a Halloween episode that never made it to air. And then we're introduced to the whole craziness of talk shows. You got the band that, you know, when someone makes a joke, they go, do-do-do-do, like, and the stupid little sidekick on the mic. He was one of my favourite characters, you know. This is a talk show, so the sets have to be impressive. What did you think of the whole layout of it?
So I thought the sets looked great. They had that immediate late night show vibe to them, but with its own sort of distinct look. On one side, you could believe a set would be made like this because, you know, it was quite 70s and retro and the colours, but also with your film nerd hat on, you immediately start seeing The Shining, and you could tell that was an inspiration on the set design. And the design's great because it's got to be interesting, because 99% of the film takes place here. But it's a great setting for a film to keep busy because, firstly, it's built into the plot. It's a TV show where they interview anyone about anything, potentially. So it's kind of anything can happen. You can just build it into the plot. There's an audience who's always there to react, but it also provides you a big group of characters to have things happen to, or reveal info, or do whatever with, so the writers and directors can play with all those different people. But also the set itself is designed to be filmed in, so things can be moved out of the way. There's always a camera here, there's a camera there, there's a lot of busyness behind the scenes as well. So it actually, even though it's stuck in one location for the whole film, you didn't ever feel like that. You never got movie setting cabin fever. It was a really intensive shoot as well, because filming was done in about 20 days for the entire film, which is really hard going, but also a lot more doable when you're in one location like this. But yeah, I love the sets.
What you said about it being an eclectic talk show, you see the classic, a British wildlife expert comes on with a tarantula or whatever it was, and we've seen that in shows before. There's like sketches where he's a caveman, and like we've seen all that before. And what I liked about it in the opening scenes, actually in the set of the talk show, the main actor was charismatic enough for you to believe that he could be a talk show host, because you can't be a dry personality, do you know what I mean? And he had that bit of charisma. And I also like straight away how he builds up the rapport with the little sidekick. You should have been more restrained when we went to that strip club, like, and then the whole audience laughs, and it invests you in the characters straight away.
And it does a great job straight away, like we said in that opening documentary, of laying out his motivations. So firstly, you have his motivation to beat Johnny Carson, and he just can never beat him. And he's at this point where he's arguably peaked and he's coming back down again. The ratings are starting to nosedive. He's potentially going to get fired. He's getting desperate. He's trying to do this big controversial out there Halloween episode to try and get some buzzer going again. But it also spent a lot of time early on showing that he had this wife, and it was the love of his life, and she was beautiful, and they loved each other, and she got cancer and she passed away. And you see a clip from when she's maybe a few weeks from dying and she comes onto the show and it's like a special show and apparently gets good ratings, but some people look at it cynically and they're like, oh, you kind of used your wife's last days as a way to try and drum up some ratings.
Which he did, by the way.
Well, yeah. Well, you kind of don't know at this point because it's quite, like, I was engaged with it, and it's that morbid thing where, as the viewer, you can complain about Jerry Springer, but I used to watch episodes back in the day because it was fucking
midgets
compelling shit, yeah. But it doesn't really shine that sort of light on it, it more just shows it. You know, at this point in the film, watching it, I was thinking, okay, so this guy's at the lowest of his low, he's desperate, he's sad, he's whatever. You know, things are going wrong. So I thought he did a really good job setting all that up, but we get to the night, and it starts off quite casually. You know, his guest to begin with, who's a magician slash occultist. He believes he's a telepath that can speak to the dead, and you know, he's that classic Colin Fry, if you're from the UK, dickhead, which my aunties apparently actually went on once and were at a recording of, where basically, you know, he'll have an audience and he'll start saying, I'm seeing an S. No S, oh no, it's actually a T, and a TH, and then someone from the back says, my granddad's pet was called Theo, and he goes, yes, Theo the tortoise. And it's just horseshit, basically. It's a thing. Orson Welles partly was the inspiration for the skeptic character, because Orson Welles, among being a great director and screen actor and writer and all that, was also apparently a magician slash occultist fortune teller. Oh, really? Did it as a hobby, but was convincing enough to convince people. And he kind of explained how easy it was on a talk show and was a skeptic about it. And like I said, clearly based on James Randi, who was that famous fortune teller, magician, occult, pretended to channel. He would do it all and then explain how he did it, why it's bullshit, and also come on and expose other people with paranormal claims.
We're going for a commercial break, and you can pick
The whole $1 million check was an absolute fact that he used to do. So you've got your different players going on. You know, you've got the phony magician. You've got the late night show host who's kind of just seeing it as all entertainment and potentially good TV anyway. You've got the skeptic who is a hardline skeptic, sees himself as rational but becomes irrational when he is genuinely presented by paranormal stuff happening later on in the film, and he can't just explain it away, so he becomes irrational then. You've also got this famed writer who's going to be a later guest in the show and is kind of the money shot. She is a psychologist who has got into the occult and worked with patients who have supposedly been possessed, written a book, and is also bringing on one of her most interesting patients who seems to be battling in and out with a demon that is possessing her. He obviously thinks it's a load of bullshit and he just wants good TV. But he's got all these guests teed up, and it starts off just like an interesting sort of late night show host. It's a bit hokey, it's a bit silly, people are going back and forth, but then as things unfold, it becomes freakier and freakier.
The phony magician, the first guy that he brought into my memory was, our American viewers won't know, we had this program in Britain called Most Haunted, where Yvette Cooper or whatever her name is, and this clairvoyant Derek Acora used to go into these so-called haunted places in Britain, and he used to go in and go, you know, there's a ghost in this fireplace, and like, it was clearly all bullshit.
If you didn't have the audio on, the show would basically look like you gave to a 4-year-old a night vision camera and said, walk around rooms and spin around and then just act like you're scared and run out every now and then. That's it. It's just a complete load of nothing.
And it was like that. But I'm picking little things out of this. Like, I already picked out the set more or less straight away. I quite like the costume design as well. The phony magician, he had like a priest dog collar on and a glittery outfit, and you know. Yeah,
I don't think he had a ponytail, but he had every other kind of generic, stereotypical, gross, greasy magician physical appearance. Like, you wouldn't buy a car off him, sort of thing. Like, he just had that vibe to him.
All he was really missing was one of those big turban things, like white turbans. And also in between this, we're getting some interaction with the audience. Most of them are dressed normally. You got a smattering of people dressed in Halloween costumes, and the talk show host goes and speaks to this weird skeleton guy who makes jokes about him, saying, oh, you've been to the bargain basement, same as the sidekick.
And a lot of the people he speaks to, at first, you later find out were plants.
Yes.
So there were people in the audience that he was meant to go to, or that would put their hands up and go with it a bit, or like in the skeleton situation where he's just acting a bit odd. So you can see Jack Delroy right from the start doesn't have any actual belief or interest in this stuff necessarily, or he's at the very least not respecting it. You know, when he's speaking to the author, who's brought in Lily, who kind of becomes the centerpiece of the film later on, we kind of see that, oh, okay, they're actually in a relationship as well behind the scenes. She's unsure about going on, and she's worried about Lily. She doesn't really want to bring Lily on because she was in a good place, but maybe she's not so much in a good place right at this second, so worried about exposing her to this on live telly. Jack Delroy starts motivating her, being like, no, you know this is right, you've worked so hard, this is your big moment. But we know he doesn't really believe that, or at least doesn't care about it. His intention's not here. He is just out for good telly. And it's the first couple of signs that we see where he's probably willing to compromise on his morals, or whatever morals he has, a lot, as long as he can get ratings and achieve that impossible dream of overtaking Johnny Carson.
As you said, you got the characters with different beliefs fighting against each other. The phony magician genuinely believes that he has powers, and the Orson Welles skeptic is going around in the background talking to the people, saying, what did they speak to you before you came here? And then they were saying, like, yes, we filled out questionnaires. So it's kind of playing in your mind as the audience member, like, who is right here? Like, who am I supposed to believe?
And it's interesting as well because obviously, you know, it's not a spoiler that, oh no, real paranormal shit's going to happen. And if it turned out that it wasn't happening, that would be a twist later on in the film. Like, it's presented from the get-go as a paranormal film. But you're watching The Magician and you can see he definitely is a bit of a phony, like we said. But it's interesting because he does pick up on something. He picks up on details that doesn't connect to anyone in the room, or no one owns up to. But then later on, Jack Delroy confesses that it made him think of his wife. You know, there was a nickname they used that only him and his wife knew about.
Minnie is the private nickname for Madeline, my wife.
So you still, as the audience, you're watching being like, okay, is he doing that for good TV? Even in between the takes, or it might be during the show still. The skeptic character is nearly disgusted, like, oh my God, are you really throwing in your dead wife there to try and get some viewings? Just to try and like make the show more interesting. So part of me, I'm wondering, okay, even retrospectively, knowing what I know after finishing the film, did he really believe that? Because we find out later that is a genuine nickname that he had for his wife. So he got that bit right. But did he believe that? Did he tell him beforehand?
Yeah, we don't know.
You're not really sure, and it doesn't exactly reveal it. The phony magician guy, the phony clairvoyant, whatever you want to call him, perhaps he's phony and he's learnt these extra tricks, you know, these Colin Fry tricks of knowing the most common names. And he throws out letters, and then most people know someone that's got ill. Most people have unfinished feelings with loved ones that have died. So there's these easy tropes you can poke people with and get them to reveal it, and it looks like you're this genius clairvoyant. But let's say you had slight clairvoyant abilities, but they're very subtle. Man A's here, and I can, if I concentrate hard enough, I can nearly get a general like Facebook about page info level on a person. Let's say you genuinely had that power. What are you going to use it for? If you actually were going to try and use that power for something as limited as it is, your probably best bet would be to become a kind of performance clairvoyant like this, and you'd splice in extra tricks to help you along. So I kind of wondered, like, was the magician a total phony? Did he have a bit of it, but he was relying on phony techniques? Or was he a complete phony that then got targeted by whatever malevolent spirit, demon, entity is haunting this studio, and that's how he started resonating real info and started freaking out?
Yeah, the majority of people who see that they think they have unique talents would come with you the premise of, I'm doing this to help people, but most people know they want to make money out of it. Money is always the outlier that everyone wants, you know. And it's like the famous saying, Declan, even a stop clock is right twice a day, you know. Like, like they're gonna be right in if they keep doing something, they're eventually gonna be right a couple of times, you know. It's like Chelsea with transfers. We buy 100 players, 2 or 3 are gonna be good.
Exactly.
You know,
just my probability.
And but if we touch on the characters, what's clever about this film is we get the documentary footage from the start to tee up the talk show host Jack Delroy, but we also get a background story to Lily and the author. She comes from an actual satanic cult, which are clearly inspired by probably either the Manson family or more likely the Waco, Texas thing where they committed suicide and burnt themselves. It was exactly the same in this. You know?
I love films like this where they marry in a lot of real life stories or notions or conspiracies or whatever, real life things, and kind of encompass it into one, but it's under a different name. And you're absolutely right. I immediately thought of the Waco murders, especially when you see the archive footage of the police storming and burning down the cult's residence. So as the magician is finishing his segment of the show, he starts kind of freaking out. He starts screaming. The audience are going with it because they're still like, oh, you know, it's obviously part of the show. Jack Delroy's kind of looking a bit perturbed, like, so you can tell, okay, this probably wasn't planned. And then he starts vomiting out this black mucus vomit substance that, don't know if it was meant to be like weird ectoplasma or just some odd bodily function that we're not aware of or whatever, but it was nothing I've ever seen come out of at least that end of a human before. Maybe if you had a couple of Guinnesses the night before, it might come out the other end. And he gets rushed off in an ambulance, but he looks okay. But then we find out later that he died on the way to the hospital.
Yeah, now the film turns into a different ball game, because when someone dies, you're like, shit, someone's lost their life here. So what is going on? You're second guessing yourself. You're like, oh, this is all fake for sensationalism, for views, but someone's lost their life. So you're like, fucking hell, man, what is going on?
And it's the first in-your-face paranormal thing to happen. There's actually a couple of odd paranormal moments that have happened already. I'll go into it later because it's a bit of a spoiler for what happens towards the end. But in terms of in-your-face malevolent paranormal shit, that's the first real incident that happened, and then it starts ramping up from this point forward, especially as the author and Lily do their seance live on camera.
I didn't really understand this because I thought patient stuff is meant to be confidential, but she wrote this whole book about her sessions with the one survivor from the satanic cult that burned down that they rescued, and she's published a book about it, and you can immediately see the friction between what she's saying and the skeptic. You know, the skeptic's being downright rude.
You truly are a suggestible lot.
Handy to know.
Mr. Higg, we haven't come on here for your amusement.
Where'd you get your qualifications from? Like, this university? And she's like saying, no, this is a proper university. And it's just really great. I was going to say TV, but really great scenes, really.
Yeah, he's a good character, the skeptic, because first of all, he's fun because he's a constant foil for the film. And he's a constant, you know, Doubting Thomas character in there to just kind of fuck with you, annoy the audience, but he's also the logical, reasonable part of it. And it's obviously not parodying, but it's channeling, good word actually for this, channeling James Randi. So it's a really fun character to throw in there. He's a character, you know, he's very eccentric. I know it's kind of like a dime a dozen round Hackney or Williamsburg, but in the 70s, like if you had a walrus mustache, you were a character. Like only fucking crazy people did that. He likes to think of himself as a rational person that relies purely on logic, and that's how he reaches truth, and he is, you know, not swayed by bias or trickery, but he's so devoted to the religion of being a skeptic and being rational that he creates explanations for even things that can be explained before he actually knows the true explanation. Like he's too married to his skepticism, he's too into it, but it is with good intentions, because we see two sides of most characters in this film. There's the side you see when the cameras are rolling, and then the side we see of them in between the takes where you're seeing just where the cameras have been left on. And Jack Delroy is a bit more cynical, and he's under pressure, and he's not all charming all the time, and he's a bit manipulative, and the author woman is a little bit concerned about Lily, and she's feeling guilty that she's already used Lily for the book, and now is she using her again for this TV show. So you're seeing all these things going on, and a lot of time you're seeing negative traits of people's personalities, of what they're really like, their character. But the skeptic never actually changes. He is always consistent when the cameras are on or they're off. He is disappointed in Jack Delroy for what he sees as just making a big hoax to trick people, and he's disgusted that this psychologist author must have convinced this poor young girl who's impressionable that she's really has been possessed, so she's acting it out. So he's actually probably morally arguably the best character in the film.
Yeah, 100%. Whether his intentions are right or wrong, what you can say about the skeptic is he sticks to his morals, and that's better than everyone else, essentially.
So we get down to the seance segment. They bring the lights down low, you know, the applause sign gets turned off for the audience. Everyone's supposed to be very quiet and respectful. They chain Lily to the chair, this sweet little girl who really nails the performance, actually. I think all the performances are good, some not great. I like the sidekick character, but I think he felt like maybe one of the weaker acting performances in the film, but mostly it's good. But the whole crux of the film really is on Lily. Like if she doesn't deliver a good performance, the whole film would fall apart, but she nails it. Yeah. Every exorcism possession film after The Exorcist will always be compared to The Exorcist. You don't really get that in many subgenres. Like, you know, I guess zombie films will always be compared to George Romero's versions, but even then I feel like you don't automatically do it, whereas any Exorcist film you think about The Exorcist. And it's funny because the Inventive idea of having the physical looks of this little girl completely change as the possession takes hold. Her eyes become bulging like Alex Ruggiero, or the literal ridges of her eyebrow bones become like more pronounced. She looks like a Cro-Magnon Neanderthal type character, and that look has basically been used in the majority of exorcism films ever since. It's just stuck for whatever reason, kind of like zombies walking slowly in the first Night of the Living Dead film. And you see she takes on this appearance and takes on the voice. So physically on paper it's not very original, but there's something about this setting and the way it plays out that I really did enjoy, even though it was somewhat predictable. And one of the funniest things that I love, and it's such an interesting insight, is that I guess the demon was asleep or not looking through Lily's eyes or sensory organs while he was dormant, because it's as if he's just woken up, and he's just woken up in the room. And naturally, even a demon is confused and like, what the fuck, when it wakes up in front of a live studio audience. Like he's saying like, where am I, Jack? What's going on?
Who are these people? What is this?
There is no need to be alarmed.
Interesting that automatically the demon seems to know Jack's name. And you think, okay, it's paranormal, it's a ghost. Every ghost film in its own universe has its own rules of what ghosts can and can't do. But you'd assume, a demon might just know anyone's name instantly.
Yeah.
So it's not that confusing. But as we find out later, it's possible that they genuinely do have some sort of history.
I got vibes of The Exorcist when she transforms. It's clearly...
Good to see you again, Jack.
Sorry, I don't believe we've been acquainted.
Don't be a fool. We go way back. We met amongst the tall trees. Remember?
Maybe not a homage to it, but as you said, everything is The Exorcist after a seminal film does it first, What was funny about it, the demon's name was Mr. Wiggles, and
Oh, was that the girl's name for him?
Yeah. She's like, oh, Mr. Wiggles is coming along, and it was just funny,
It's kind of believable as well, because when she was first possessed, she was obviously a lot younger than 14, the age she is on the night of the show. But that is the kind of name you might come up with.
100%.
It's like Tony in The Shining. Like, it's just the kind of silly name a kid would attach to it.
100%, and weird shit starts happening, lights start flickering, the classic chair objects start floating around, and there's electric currents and all this stuff, and it's scary, man. And they done it pretty well. And then what's good about it is skeptics looking at it, and he doesn't even seem phased. And then afterwards, Jack Delroy's like, stop messing about now, you're just scared to give up the $1 million check. You just won't do it, we've clearly all seen it. And then he says, let me one up it, like, I'll show you something. He hypnotizes not only the whole audience, but the timid sidekick who hates worms, and then he starts ripping his own skin off in a gory scene where he thinks worms are taking him over, and the skeptic's like, oh shit, I can't control it.
Dreamer, here, awake!
Now that was a really funny scene because, like you said, he clicks his fingers and there's no more worms and intestines spilling out of the sidekick's guts. He's fine. The whole audience relaxes. Jack Delroy relaxes, and everyone's kind of like, oh, what the fuck? And me watching it, I thought, first of all, the scene was so visually deliberate. Like, there was no mistaking that there was these worms were coming out of this guy's body. And then it seemingly was just hypnotism. But I was thrown off by the fact that even more than the paranormal stuff happening, it felt less realistic that he actually hypnotized the entire crew and the entire studio audience watching. Like, I could believe, okay, you were showing a perspective of someone who was hypnotized and believed it, but everyone believed it. Everyone saw that at once. The person way in the back who could barely even hear was also hypnotized. So I was watching that thinking, okay, so either the whole film now is going to be about, no, the paranormal is not happening, but it's all about perspective and how we're influenced and stuff, or the skeptic either has actually been a paranormal bad actor as in like a bad faith person. He's come there with different intentions to deceive everyone, and he really is the devil, the end of The Usual Suspects. The devil's greatest trick was making us think he didn't exist, sort of thing. Because that is actually a recurring thing in the actual original biblical kind of texts and ideas around Satan, was that Satan's thing was always making you think he wasn't Satan. He actually was the good guy. It wasn't enough to make you do evil or do evil to you. He had to trick you into doing evil and make you think it was righteous. So I was thinking, okay, so is it going to turn out he's the thing? He's the guy. And he, like you said, he was doing all this to showcase the fact that the possession and the otherworldly, unexplainable, or possibly special effects, but seemingly unexplainable things like the lights tripping and electricity sparks going from random places just as the girl's possessed and saying things. Also, we forgot to say, but she's being removed from the possession at this point, and she's seemingly returned back to Lily, but feels like not original Lily. It feels like Lily 2.0 with maybe a dash of Abraxsys, this demon that's supposedly possessing her, still in there.
The skeptic had arguments of like, this is just stage trickery, but I was starting to believe that bad stuff is happening now. And I guess that's testament to Lily's performance, because she was very unnerving. Even when she was back in her sweet element, she was like, are you okay, Jack? Like,
she keeps staring at Jack the whole time. She seems to know his name. The author, when she's expressing her concerns before the segment is filmed to Jack Delroy, mentions that a couple of days ago she started acting different, and she started suddenly talking about you a lot and saying your name, and she seemed to know things about you. She knew she was coming on the show, but it was odd. It was as if she actually had met you before. So she's dropping these hints. After he's done his hypnotism trick on the whole audience, he gets them to replay the tape where they see that it was the classic, if you've ever been to like Butlins or something shit, where the magician brings up a couple of mums from the crowd and has them thinking they're chickens on stage, where, you know, the fat sidekick is just sort of like rolling around on the floor grabbing his stomach while nothing's really happening.
Yeah.
So then he demands that they go back and replay the taping when the little girl was possessed, because the skeptic seemingly is convinced that, again, we'll see nothing was actually happening and it was simple hypnotism. And it's this great moment where a layer of what's really going on in the paranormal and subtext sense is revealed. They're going through the tape and they can see that, no, the stuff really was happening. The girl was possessed. The skeptic's kind of being like, no, that can't be happening, blah, blah, blah. As they're watching it, he notices something for a split second. He's like, what's that? So he gets them to go back. They're playing it at like 1 frame a second. So every frame just stays up for a second and then disappears. As it gets to it, we see suddenly for a brief second a ghostly apparition of his deceased wife, resembling her last remaining days when she was dying of cancer and she had no hair, next to him with her hand on his shoulder. And then it cuts out and you're just left with that. Not the film, sorry, but then it moves on to the next frame and you see really good subtle acting from the main actor. It's like a knife has gone through his soul. Whatever that feeling of plunging in your stomach whenever you get a holy shit moment is, his stomach is just drained out like a black hole. Like, he just looks like death.
The phony magician has said something along the lines of an unmarried man, and he reveals that I have this wedding ring on from my wife, but we were never actually married. And we see later in the film Jack Delroy kneeling by his dying wife's bedside as she is succumbing to cancer, really ill. She's in so much pain that she's begging him to kill her, and she's saying, you being part of this cult Bohemian Grove, yes, you'll get success, but that success comes as a price, and they've taken my lifeblood away from me, and look at me now, I'm a shell of a woman. And obviously he's guilty, but his main goal is to still be successful. So you're like, what a scumbag, you know.
So when that scene takes place, it's up in the air whether it's a 100% genuine memory or a mixing of memory and his own imaginations and guilt, or torturing from the demon, because, you know, in a general sense that probably does sum up what's happened, but I don't think maybe that exact conversation ever took place, if you know what I mean. It's not an exact memory, but it does sum up what it is about. And it's, again, so like we said, Abraxsys is supposedly, in spiritual terms, in real life, the way it's historically referred to, you know, he was this hugely powerful demon and kind of was a bit of the sell your soul to the devil type character, where he could give you things, but you would have to basically give up something. You wouldn't know what it's going to be, but it'd be the thing that's most important to you in order to get whatever you desire. Supposedly, in the mythology around it, you would get what you desire first, but the penance would be paid 5 years later. And from him getting his late night show and becoming successful, they actually dated it 5 years later is when his wife got this sudden terminal illness and passed away. So you're seeing his background with Bohemian Grove, his desperation to get the viewing figures back again. He's still just doing it, obviously, just for ratings, but when he's doing this paranormal night, he actually does know there's something more to it, and he is being disrespectful, and he knows he's actually playing with fire. He's not just having a fun Halloween episode. He is being dangerous and being disrespectful to this demon spiritual figure that seems to be incredibly powerful, that he's already had a bad interaction with. You know, he's lost his wife over, so yeah, it adds a whole different context to the whole film and what's happening.
Yeah, he's a scumbag, because like there's innocent people there that don't know about it. His sidekicks, the guests, the audience members, they're all in the firing line to lose their life from his selfish behaviour, essentially. He's a wanker.
He really is.
He's a prick, like, do you know what I mean?
And you see other people in between the segments being filmed when the show's not being broadcast. You see, you know, his sidekick is saying like, this is getting freaky, like weird things are happening, I think we should shut the show down. You know, some of the crew are literally leaving or abandoning their post. They're having to rope in other people to operate the cameras and stuff because people are getting freaked out. And he is just the captain of the Titanic saying, I don't care if there's an iceberg, we're going straight to it. And everyone's freaking out. So you see, it's all he cares about. It's his only real motivation. And as shit really starts kicking off and Abraxsys starts really swinging his dick around, possessing Lily, kills the author by having her pulled up to her height by her own crucifix necklace, splitting her throat open. The poor sidekick who sort of prophesies his own death jokingly when he talked about losing his head at some point, has his neck pretty much pulled the whole way round. Again, original Exorcist style. And the skeptic, which is actually a really great little moment. It's nearly a comedic moment reminiscent of the little scummy, treacherous character from The Mummy from 1999, where he's in the tunnels and he's confronted by the mummy. He gets out first a crucifix and starts speaking Latin, and he gets out a Jewish symbol, starts speaking Hebrew, Jewish, and he keeps going through the things until something
Buddha.
works. And you see the skeptic is at first like, this is still bullshit, and then when people start dying, he says, oh shit, pulls out the check and presents that to him. And on one level, it's just a comedic moment for his character because he's just trying anything at the last second. He's like, maybe this demon will take money, as if it cares about that. But it's also a funny thing where, you know, saying the money is the root of evil is a very, I always thought it's kind of a bit of a simplified, silly take. You know, it's much more nuanced than that. Money is just a lubricant to grease the wheels of the economy and trade and make things easier, and it makes things so much easier to, you know, provide services for a certain rate and then buy goods for a certain rate. You know, it's just a thing that needs to exist. But there is a weird thing where it is nearly like a worship of money, and by extension of money, all goods and contents, and generally that seems to go in the face of spiritualism. True spiritualism, you know, the Vatican is more wealthy than most fucking royalty. Like, they have such enormous wealth. They're really kind of being hypocritical in that sense. But generally the motifs of spirituality is kind of the inverse of not that money and stuff is evil, but placing all your belief system and motivation to money and materialistic things is kind of the antithesis of spiritualism. And it's interesting where it's nearly like, if you take also Jack's desperation to be successful and beat Johnny Carson as kind of an extension of that same materialism in a way, where, you know, you're being vain, you've got an ego, you're putting this achievement that only has value if you give it value, you're valuing that more than your relationships with your loved ones, even the life of his most loved and cherished person. He tries religion and then he tries money. It's like that's the other god that's being worshipped through this, and you know, even down to the original little hoax magician, it seems to be a running theme of worshipping materialism and personal gain over genuine spiritualism and belief in these things.
Yeah, it doesn't work because Abraxsys explodes him.
Yeah.
So yeah, that monologue was good, but it just didn't work.
It didn't mean shit.
Yeah, and you know, we then see flashbacks of Jack Delroy with Bohemian Grove. We see the skeleton guy in the costume there. We see the satanic cult leader, and, you know, them welcoming him in. Because
the film at this point nearly becomes a fever dream where he's walking in and out of sets, and he seems to just appear in segments. And there's segments like we've seen already, but they're not really. They're, you know, their characters replaced or something paranormal's happening, and it's more his subconscious being played with. In his dream state, he finally puts his wife out of her misery, but then wakes up to discover he's actually stabbed Lily.
He kind of like snaps out of it and wakes up next to a dead Lily and he seemingly stabbed her with the satanic dagger.
And I guess it's that final punch of he's destroyed innocence just in the name of ratings and personal progress and success. Or it's just a fuck with him at the end. It's just a cool way to...
I saw it as he is the last one left standing in his trail of destruction, surrounded by dead bodies. Yeah, you've got your ratings, but at what cost? I really enjoyed this film. I think they could have done certain bits a bit better, flesh it out a bit more, and you know what you said about the acting, it let it down a bit, especially the phony magician. I agree with you on that, but like the idea as a whole, I thought it was quite a fresh take, you know, so I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I gotta say, I didn't leave the film truly satisfied, and that's not even really that much of a jab on the film, because it was a really good film, really enjoyed it. You know, it has the Stephen King stamp of approval. He loved it and raved about the film. It's brilliant. It is actually a really good film, but it's a film that has such a wonderful premise, such a wonderful build-up. It walks you through into such an interesting place and then just walks away. It felt undercooked, like it didn't truly deliver on the promise it built up to. Maybe if they had a bigger budget, they could have done this because they obviously had limitations, but I didn't need a crazy gore-fest blood orgy Event Horizon style to unfold on the audience or the crew. But I did want more paranormal stuff to happen. Like, I know it gets crazy right at the very end, but I wanted more sprinkles in early on. I wanted maybe the doors are shut and the audience can't leave, or so, you know, become a bit more cosmic horror than just a casual possession film. But, you know, having said that, I did really enjoy it, and that is an easy recommendation from the Filmy McFilm Film Show.
Sorry, I don't believe we've been acquainted.
Don't be a fool. We go way back. We met amongst the tall trees. Remember?